Hi there, morning friend.
Good morning. How
How
are
are
you?
you?
I'm very well. How are you, my friend? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me
Cool.
as well?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you doing this morning? Is it morning where you
Yeah,
are?
yeah, it's morning. It's 8 in the morning.
Ah, nice.
How's it for you?
It's great. It's 5 a.m. here in
Wow.
Chiapas.
Yeah, you woke up early, right?
I was gonna wake up early, but I ended up just like jamming out to Sinjin's music all night. It was like got me super hyped. So I just
Uh-huh.
like stayed up all night.
So you didn't sleep yet?
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning,
morning, bro.
Stubbs.
I don't know who chose this time, but I'm tired.
What time is it there? Where are you at?
Uh, 4 a.m.
Wow.
But I mean, it's my fault. I just stayed up too late, so
Mm,
and I'm always tired.
yeah, I stayed up.
No hurries.
I stayed up too late. Also, I just decided to pull an all-nighter, I guess.
I always have that like thought of should I just stay up all night? And honestly, it's like I feel way better. Like I would feel better right now just staying up. It's just later when I would be miserable.
I know it's basically like trading daylight hours for nighttime because I'm gonna have to go to bed after this for sure. And then what's the rest of my day gonna be like? It's gonna be super weird. Polyphasic.
Yeah. Well, when I worked the night shift for a while, and it was like a 4 day shift and then a night shift, and uh, so that I'd actually have time with my family on the day before or the morning before I would start. I would just like have be a normal day and go all day, and then go to the shift, and then at the end of the week I would come home from work and just stay up. And you're like, I did that for nearly a year, and honestly, I'm like, how did I survive that? Because I was basically not sleeping 2 days out of the week, and I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, man, that's hard. You know, I realized something recently. I think I've learned this before, but recently as well, again, relearning, is that sometimes when I feel really sad or like aggravated, a lot of the times I just didn't get enough sleep. But it's amazing how much that affects my whole perspective of life and just like everything about what I'm doing. And sometimes I don't even realize it. It's like, oh,
Oh
like
yeah.
I just need to sleep more. And I just get more sleep and I feel great and everything's amazing. Life is wonderful.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I feel the same. I feel the same. If I don't get a good night of sleep, I just feel like I'm hungover the next day.
Mm,
Mhm. Yeah, sleep, exercise, and food. You're like, you don't even realize how much it can alter your emotions and attitude and everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
oh yeah, you guys,
Oh, I wonder if
what was that?
what's that?
Oh well, I got a recording setup going. Um, I had to vet through a lot of weird stuff, but finally found a really good uh, software to do it with. So I'm recording this. I'm going to make sure that's okay with
What are
y'all.
you using?
It's called OBS, and it actually is able to record the screen and incorporate. I was playing with it actually last night. Just like you can actually put images and you can embed different windows. So it'll be cool. I'll actually post the video and maybe we can start posting things in a YouTube channel for a community to like catch up on if they want to. I know that's been useful for me and other DAOs when they post their meetings on YouTube. It's really cool. So you can actually see who's talking as well.
That is really cool. Yeah, you'll have to let us know, on the back end what it looks like if there are any issues and everything. Because yeah, it's amazing how you're like, oh, if you're not able to make a meeting, you feel like you have no idea what's going on. You miss out on the thought process behind everything, and so this would be really nice.
Totally. It's all about like kind of cultivating the hive mind potential, like like how much can we breathe like osmosis between the intelligence that's digested by each person that can kind of be absorbed by each other person and blend in this way.
Yeah,
it's part of that process.
It's totally true, because you're like, so much of what goes into, like, if you were to just read, like, the documents that come out of DAOs and stuff, and you're not in the meeting, you're missing out on so much of the culture and why it's working, and it would be like, okay, these are, a lot of times you're like, the stuff that gets put out by DAOs is sub quality compared to the traditional work world, but it's because it's like you're missing out on most of the depth. It's an iceberg. So yeah, hopefully we can all figure out better how to transfer that knowledge and culture and all that.
Yeah, well, I'm really enjoying Discord, as a way of actually engaging with people on a personal level and having those layers to it of engagement. And I totally feel what you're saying. That's a really cool observation.
Yeah, well, and my wife, I'm like, if you want to, because I've been trying to get her to get more interested in crypto and DAOs and NFTs and everything, and she's like, well, I just don't get it. I'm like, you have to be on, in Discord, and you have to like start looking at Twitter, because if you don't have those two things, like, you can't just go to a website and know what's going on.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. And then when you are in more than a DAO and people with different time zones, it seems there's a call going on all day long. And yeah, it's totally different from working. You don't have to be there, but I always feel that I want to be there because there's just so much good energy and so many smart ideas and smart people talking. I feel the need to be there. It's funny.
Yeah. Well, it looks like, I don't know if anyone else is going to show up.
We didn't even. Where are you at? Where are you located, Diego?
Sorry?
Where are you located? Are you in Brazil?
Yeah, I'm in Brazil. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I just guessed from your name. I have another Brazilian friend named Diego.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
But yeah, the European folks didn't even show up, man. What the heck? That's awesome. That's hilarious. Do you guys see my screen on there? Do you see what I got going on?
Yeah,
This is the recording software. So, maybe at another point I can give a brief tutorial for anyone, because I really vetted through a lot of software to get to the point where this thing actually works really well. And a lot of the other stuff gets to a lot of like technological dead ends where there's just nothing you can do, and you basically have to like reroute your audio in this way. And this one just works really well. So with the other ones, you like can't listen to it at the same time that it records because you have to route your output into the recording software. And if you listen to it, it has like this feedback problem because it's also recording the internal audio that you're listening to at the same time, and it loops. It does this feedback thing. But this one solves that problem, and you don't have to install any additional plugins to make it work. And then obviously it like records video, and then you can like lay out the windows in this custom way. So I put in the image there on the bottom, and then I have the screen of us talking, and then I also have like the community chat. I actually put it on the grants channel on the left.
Yeah, this is really cool. That looks really nice.
It's pretty cool how it's kind of mirroring in on itself like that. Anyway, shall we? Okay, what's on the agenda?
So I think, what we wanted to do, I mean, kind of the idea was we need to start working on the actual execution layer and how we're going to get started with that on this grants program, because obviously what went into the proposal was all high level, and I mean, you kind of touched on a few things when you were asking about like, hey, how many people do we want on the actual coordinators? I know that we kind of thrown out the number previously of like 3 to 5, but yeah, all of the kind of details is what we need to start working on. Also, the snapshot that you brought up, like it's funny because since since snapshot is really like centralized, you would have to like be part of the core team and all of that to actually put snapshot votes up and blah blah blah. I didn't even think about saying like, hey, we need to have the proposal up as a on IPFS and make sure that or get hub or anything like that. So those are really good points. Thank you for bringing up the need and the kind of us missing on that for this initial proposal.
Excuse me, guys. I want to apply for the grant. Does it make sense to be here on this meeting?
I mean, I think so. I mean, that's kind of the nice thing about having. Well, the nice thing about a DAO and having all these meetings be open is, I mean, in my opinion, if we have anyone who is like getting compensated or like really in control, then maybe they shouldn't be able to get a grant. But I mean, it would almost be like, hey, if you're actually involved in helping build this thing, then you're not allowed to benefit from it, which I don't agree.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was afraid of. If I would be if being here, I would getting some kind of inside information, this kind of thing. But if you guys don't see a problem with that,
yeah, I mean, since since like who gets funded and everything is going to be more by the community, and I think it makes sense. The grant program that I ran before when I took over, we specifically said that anyone that was like in charge couldn't receive a grant because it had been really bad previously, where like the actual program leaders were getting grants and getting fully funded, because with our program you had to like ask a certain amount based on your needs, and it was actually really ridiculous and kind of embarrassing. So we were like, anyone who's in leadership can't get funded, but that was because we had control. So I think it makes sense for this program to, say if we have community, like the grants leaders, then maybe they aren't, because we may have them do some initial like pruning of the applicants and whittle it down slightly for the first list to vote on or something like that. But I definitely think that it should be encouraged, not just allowed, to have people come work on the grants program if they want to be funded and things like that. But that's my personal opinion.
Okay, so just let me know if you guys decide something different on the way, because as I said, I want to apply, so I don't want to make a bad impression on that, to being here and applying for that later.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
what's everyone else's initial thoughts on that?
I have the same question. I mean, I would like to apply for the grant, and I also want to be more and more involved. So it's kind of interesting because it's like, on one hand, totally makes sense. I mean, it's a kind of a classic DAO situation where like all of the people with governance tokens just vote to like drain the treasury into their own pockets. So we all just vote to like circulate grants amongst ourselves, because it's like, oh, we're building a DAO, so like we're the perfect candidates, right? But yeah, I don't know. It's a super good question. But I have the same question, so.
Well, I think that one thing that it is interesting too, because initially all of the frameworks have to be created. We all know that it's time consuming, and both like actual time and our emotional and intellectual energies are drained building this stuff. So it's funny where you're like, well, you want to compensate people for their work. I mean, DAOs were kind of created to make sure that people are actually compensated for the work and the value and the energy that they put in, and it's not one person getting all the value. But at the same time, we kind of run into where it's like, oh, all these people are working for a DAO for free, and kind of finding that balance is, I think, one of the things that's going to be really important. And I don't know the answer to that, but since especially right now, the people who are excited about this and building it are also the ones who are potentially wanting to work for the grants. I think it's just important for us to, number one, be transparent about the desire to do the grant. So, like, I'm glad that both of you are saying, hey, this is what I want to do. But also, I think it just makes it very important for us to craft like the initial screening process, and make sure that it's very apparent that it's not us in control of who gets the grants, where it's like, hey, all of us did the grants program and we all got funded the first cohort. Crazy. But maybe that makes sense. So being able to record the meetings and getting that OBS, I think like that's one of the huge things. But yeah, I think that just makes it way more important that for the execution layer for these grants, just make sure that it doesn't look like we're just all benefiting ourselves. And then, another thing on that is, it's like, okay, specifically in several of the discussions, and I'm not sure if we I can't remember if we like explicitly say it in the grants proposal, but it's like, we're not limiting the grants to just like DAO Punk holders, but at the same time, it's likely that at least for a while, it's DAO Punk holders who are receiving the grants, because generally the people who are involved here are the ones who actually have the NFTs and things like that. So it's like, we in the future, it may be that people who are actually involved in grants and treasury and governance and all of that, they're being compensated out of the treasury or something like that in a different way than the grants, since it's a different type of work. Um, but it may evolve to that, and how we start our first cohort and everything is likely going to be very different than how it works once this is established.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of what we're discussing in governance with the working group model is kind of the ability to recognize specific coordinators for each working group who are putting time into writing documentation, these kinds of things, and then running like coordinate rounds for compensation for those folks. And I like that point about, creating the structure of a DAO in such a way that contributors are compensated. I think there's a lot of ways of compensating people beyond, like there's a lot of social value and there's a lot of like cultural value that can be gained as well as like financial gain. But maybe Hiro and Joey have some thoughts on those topics. How you guys doing?
GM.
DM friend.
Yeah.
I was just going through actually the document. I joined because I had a question, and I'm not sure if it's part of the scope of what the document covers, because I think it's mainly focused on the ideal DAO punk or the how the grant funds will be dispersed. But what I was a bit concerned about was so it's meant to be a 6 week um let's say length of the program, of the grant program. Is there sort of a yardstick to measure if the grantee, is that a word? If the person receiving the grant is already able to go full DAO punk before coming off the grant? Like, is there a way to ensure like some sort of self-sustenance while they are figuring out the whole, like a roadmap of, okay, this is what the grant is going to help you do. These are the tools, to get you working in DAOs and earning being able to transition from earning, corporate, job income to potentially living off sustainably working in a DAO. Like, is that something that we need to clarify in the outline of the grant program? I'm not sure if it's part of the scope.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. One that's um, sort of come up. I know we've kind of addressed it in the past in different like a sub thread or things like that. So in the grants proposal, it does say, hey, the ideal person is ready to go full time. Also, I think I at least tried to make it very clear that like what it means to be sustainable and have already been working in DAOs and things like that is, um, you know, looks very different for different people. What your lifestyle is and what you want it to be is going to heavily influence what you think is sustainable. So, we kind of put in there that we want you to have already been starting to work in DAOs and know what you're getting into, so that this, transition of the funds for 6 weeks is not a, hey, um, this gives me a chance to look at DAOs and look at DAO work. It's a, hey, this gives me a chance to transition from doing it nights and weekends and early in the morning when you have time to more of a full-time thing. Um, I think we also put in there that, and this may go from being a in some situations to a expected thing, but if a grantee doesn't think that they think they're on the path to being sustainable, but 6 weeks at the end of 4 weeks or whatever, they're like, oh, I am gaining traction, but I need an extension. That people will be able to come back and apply for that. Um, we may find that 6 weeks is not long enough, and that we want to make it so it's expected, where it's like, hey, if you're in the cohort, you get a 6-week grant. You get started as long as like you're excited and the community sees your involvement, all of that, then it's expected that you get a follow-on grant or something like that. It may evolve to be more than 6 weeks. But yeah, the reason that the ideal person has already been working in it and everything is just so that hopefully they already have a plan, they already have a DAO that they're working for, and they and the DAOs that they're working for, like, hey, if you could just spend 40 hours a week instead of 4, then we've got all the opportunities in the world for you. And this just helps with that transition. Does that kind of answer your question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm getting a bit the idea of what you as you're speaking. I was also looking through the document as well. I think it makes sense. I think again it's like the first cohort, right? So I think there'll be iterations and tweaks that are needed to and this is my second question actually, to get the grant like self-sustaining. Are there mechanisms in place to make sure or that we have that the treasury or for the amount of ETH that we have for the grant is either replenishing or doesn't have like a runway of, I don't know, 56 weeks and then that's it? Like, is there anything like that so far?
Yeah, so that right there is another good question where we've been how long we're going to have this program, how we're going to replenish the treasury it's going to be interesting, and also why we're trying to spin up things like the podcasts and newsletters and things that could potentially bring in revenue.
Right.
And like I know Crypto Bushi is doing some of these collaborations with like City DAO and things like that to bring more money to the treasury. Right now, I don't think that there is a concrete plan on how to extend that. It's kind of been a who goes first. So it's like, well, how much can we fund people? How many people can we fund? And then the question is like, well, how much money do we need to bring into the treasury because we don't know how much we're spending? And then the people are like, well, we don't know how much to spend because we don't know how much money is coming into the treasury. So the cat and mouse game right there. But hopefully we can start getting different community members to start building together that they can, do a spin-off and have some of their proceeds go to the treasury to help grow it. But right now I think I can't remember off the top of my head how much we have in the treasury, but the thought was, I think we were going to do like 3 ETH for this first one, and if we're doing 6 weeks, then I want to say we have like about 18, 19 ETH. So you could do 6 iterations at this point if each cohort spent the same amount. Obviously, we want to grow it, but can't do that until we start growing the treasury as well. But I think we specifically talked about also making sure that we don't have this treasury that's like 100 ETH that we could give grants in perpetuity. Basically, if we gave out 2 ETH per grant, we want to make sure that we have a runway that kind of pushes people to bring money to the treasury as well. So
Exactly. Cool.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Like these one-to-one collabs are going to bring in money into the treasury. I think we're going to see a number of those happen in the future. And then it's sort of an active conversation with CB and Sinjin about whether to do, additional mintings, because I had that same concern, right? Like, how long is the runway for not bringing in consistent revenue to the treasury, right? And there's sort of a disagreement about how to proceed like that. And so it's very much up in the air at the moment whether you're going to have a minting round, after every cohort, which is an idea I like. CB has his own ideas about why that's not a great idea. So it's part of a conversation we have to have, going forward for sure. But you're right, Stubbs. It's 19 ETH in the treasury. and then there'll be more after we get paid for some one-to-ones.
Yeah, like I think that what we're creating is so incredibly useful to the whole DAO ecosystem that once we have a sort of hardened framework that is a little bit field tested and we've vetted out some issues and we've sorted out our governance process and we have like a really, like people with funding, like big projects who need more developers and who need workers and coordinators and people to come work for them and they can't find talent, like they will see this project as an opportunity to basically just siphon people into the entire DAO ecosystem. And I think that there will be like more funding than we know what to do with. That's just my perception of things. Like I've made myself aware of some of the statistics as far as like the need for developers and stuff, and it's like it's insane. Like I think one of the statistics is like basically there's 4,000 active developers in total on Ethereum, and that includes like all the DeFi dApps and everything. Like basically 1,000 smart contract developers are responsible for caretaking, creating smart contracts that handle over $100 billion worth of assets. Just between like 1,000 smart contract developers in the entire world, it's like nuts, like there's so much need for people, not just developers, but all kinds of talent, that I think we can really offer like an immense public service to the DAO space. And once we actually start handing out like a handful of grants, I think a lot of excitement is going to start to happen, and there's just going to be a lot of different kinds of opportunities for income. I mean, I think Gitcoin is a really cool thing. I don't know if anyone has been talking about that much.
Yeah, no, and I think you're absolutely correct about that, where it's like, yeah, we need to start bringing in some money, but, partnerships with things like Opolis and, Gitcoin and Aragon, place like that, I think once we prove out that, yes, we're getting grants, they see that this isn't a, program that just enriches the initial people who started it, et cetera, et cetera. I do think it'll be a lot easier to start reaching out to these different organizations and be like, hey, even if you don't think that you're going to get developers out of this, it is important that we grow this ecosystem and have some of these, public goods. And I think that will be at least a major, I think it'll be a major revenue source, is just donations from people who've gotten grants and other organizations and all of that. So, but we have to create something that's worth donating to first.
Yeah, so there's a few things to that, and I agree. I mean, Stubbs and Mike are totally right, and also like other, just I guess to go back for a sec. I mean, other revenue sources like that tax punk. Part of those proceeds go into the treasury, which is good. I think initially for sure, and I'm not sure, I can't quite recall if it's long term, but there's a nice source there. I set up a nonprofit, and we haven't done anything with it yet, but essentially a nonprofit called DAOPuck Syndicates in Delaware. And the idea would be that those donations could then be tax deductible, right, for other DAOs. So that'll be really inviting. I think you're totally right. Like, people are waiting to see in the ecosystem whether or not we can actually pull off a grants round. And after that's successful, it's going to create a lot more buzz again, right? And so, I'm hopeful, like you guys are, that the funding issue, long term, even if you don't mint, every consecutive cohort, will be okay. But I think you're also going to see a lot more one-to-one collabs. Those are 3 ETH currently. We're talking about bringing those up to 5 ETH, per punk. So that's a significant amount of dough. And yeah, but I mean, it's an issue. It's part of the reason, Joey, like why we only did 3 ETH on this initial round, right? Because arguably it should have been higher. I mean, at least from a sustainability standpoint, because 3 ETH, 1 ETH per is obviously not a ton of money, to really help someone transition. I mean, depending on their circumstance.
Also, I mean, when we were saying 1 ETH was like 45, 4,800, whatever. So, it would have helped a lot more.
It's totally true. So yeah, there was one other thing I was thinking about, but it's 3:30 in the morning. I can't quite remember what it was. I don't know. Yeah, it's pretty funny. We set this meeting up for Europeans, and Joey, I think you're the only European here. Aside.
Actually, I'm doing this like while still at work, so but it's things are a bit slow, so yeah.
Yeah, but makes sense what Hero said, that since this is the first round of the program, there's lots of blind spots that we don't see right now, and it will be a kind of experimental thing, It's the first time that this goes on, so we're probably gonna have some problems that we will have to improve in the future. But if we never start, we never gonna get some kind of way to have feedback, right?
Totally. Oh, there's one more. That's the other thing too. Is like I would expect like at some point we're going to and we've talked roughly to a few DAOs like this, but at some point you're going to develop almost like a scholarship program, right? Where you'd have a DAO that supports a granting round, and then maybe gets their pick of a grantee to go work within that DAO, or gets the entire cohort to go work in that DAO. So that's another avenue that I think is probably pretty realistic if we wanted to go down that route.
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be a good idea. Because lots of people are already kind of this space, but they don't know where they fit, right? They 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 have the energy, they have the will, but they just don't know how to start. That would be cool.
It's totally true. Another revenue source that people are talking about kicking up is really sort of comprehensive educational materials, and then perhaps there'd be a premium content feature to those. I'm not part of those, so I'm not really sure what exactly they're talking about, or if it's actually been fleshed out. But that would be a potential other source. So, there's a lot out there. It's just kind of getting legs under them. So, but I don't think like things for podcasts and newsletters. As long as there's a nice quality to them, which I would expect. I think sponsorship for those will be realistic, and part of that money, of course, would go to the people working on those projects, but part of it would, of course, also go to the treasury. And then just so you know, hey, Michael, I'm working on getting. I mean, CraigBot's invited to the server, but like the typical commands you use to activate it aren't working. So I pinged our sort of server guy. He changed the activation. What would you call it? I mean, symbol, I guess. From slash commands to dollar signs for other things. I'm wondering if you did the same thing for like overall. So I'm over here just like in the bot channel trying to get it to work.
Nice.
Well, and here you missed out on the beginning where Micah was showing us this beautiful program for recording. And I mean, if you want to share your screen again, that would so I loved it.
I'm sorry, did you say, Stubbs, this is a different bot to record with?
Check it out, Hero.
Yeah.
This is what I did all night instead of sleeping and waking up early. I vetted through like 4 different software suites with like plugins to try to figure out how to route the audio properly through here, and I finally found one that works really well. So we're gonna have like really sweet video audio recordings of all of our meetings.
Oh, so you have this all figured out, so we don't need to worry about. I mean, we still should have a server-wide recording bot.
Yeah, recording bot, super sweet, super easy to do for anyone who like doesn't have the software set up or whatever, just to slash command the thing in.
Oh, this is great. So you're using OBS, which I've heard of but don't know about, really. And then
yeah, it works really well. I highly recommend it for anyone.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
it works. The ability to route the audio, the internal audio and microphone at the same time is excellent.
You're kind of rugged a bit, Maiko, but sweet. Um,
Yeah, and talking about how the audio works so well. But so, who is able to apply, what directions the runway looks like, all of that. I think those are, obviously have to be answered. They're really important. Um, but those are kind of work in progress. I think that
we, we
out of this.
I'm sorry, Stubbs. Can we stop right there? Because I did jump in and then heard, concerns about people working on the grants, committee or proposals and all those things not qualifying for grants. Is that did I hear that correctly? I just want to be clear.
No, no. So the question, you heard the question correctly of, are people who are working on grants, governance, all of that, like, are they eligible? I was saying that obviously we want to make sure that the structure is transparent, so it doesn't appear that it's just like, oh, whoever worked on it is going to get funded and they're the only ones. But that it would be crazy not to have the people working on this stuff eligible, because we want people who are helping build the community, especially at the beginning, to be part of it. So we need to figure out what this structure looks like, and for picking, whittling down the applicant pool and all of that. But yeah, I think that they should be eligible.
Okay, cool. Yeah, me too. But good to hear. I'm glad I misunderstood.
I kind of want to play devil's advocate. Wait, can you hear me now?
Do it.
Yeah, I kind of just want to play devil's advocate on that, because it's like, earlier we were also talking about how a DAO can actually fund itself. Like, our DAO, but any DAO, needs to kind of, a lot of us are here and we're excited to contribute, but sometimes there's a culture of like teasing and not really like following through with being able to. I guess there's just like a rich culture of reciprocation of like energy, that when people start being compensated for their work, like the quality of the work increases a lot, because they suddenly are like capable of making more time and space and feeling more like investing a certain level of quality into their work. And so in a way, it's like, if people working on our DAO framework would be getting grants, I mean, it's almost like it'd be better if it was like the same situation, except instead of calling it grants, you just called it like your team, people getting compensated, and the actual grants go to people outside the core group. Because I think from the outside, that would just look a lot better too, and it would feel like with greater integrity, I think, to the vision. And like I feel like I was kind of saying earlier, I think, is if like this early stage is just like the opportunity for us to kind of prove ourselves and our process, knowing that we're going to sort of be, scrutinized later on by really big players who, like, there's a lot of really extremely well-funded projects who are just dying for talent that they can't find. And I'm sensing like that there's a lot of, there's an awareness awakening for a lot of well-funded people to start just contributing money on a donation basis to the funding education for new developers. Because like a lot of what's going around that I'm seeing is that it's more cost effective to hire somebody who doesn't know anything about crypto or programming and train them for a whole year while paying them, and then hire them for what you want them to build, it's cheaper to do that than it is to try to hire like a current developer because there's so few and they're in such high demand. So I think there's like a lot of funds that are going towards whatever kinds of programs people can come up with to just bring more talent into the scene. And yeah, I think like just like the more richness and robustness that we can create now, the better. And you know, if we can do that, then I don't think that funding is going to be any kind of an issue other than maybe like having too much funding and not knowing what to do with it. That's just my personal feelings about it.
Yeah, and so like I totally get where you're coming from, which is why I personally, even if it was allowed, wouldn't apply for the grant because I wouldn't feel right about it. I mean, like the other grants program that I did, everyone felt great about, hey, awarding grants to leadership because they're in the space. It was there were grants for entrepreneurship and to get business started, and the leadership team, all of us were actively involved in that kind of thing. So we were the type of person who could receive the grant based on all the eligibility criteria, but I didn't feel right about it. So because of how involved I was, um, I don't think we want to make it so that people who are working on this are not eligible just because general like they're the ones who are contributing, asking questions, and you really disincentivize people from getting involved and participating and helping build. And you say, if you do, you're no longer eligible. And down the road we can say, once we have enough of the treasury where you say like we are compensating the people that are working on all of these working groups, like the core teams or the people who are contributing a lot, then you can say you're no longer eligible because you're being compensated. You've already moved to full-time DAO or part-time DAO, whatever, and so you're kind of past the point of this grant because this is helping build transition. So, if you're already full-time DAO and you're helping build things, then you don't need help transitioning. You already did. But if you need help with that, then you shouldn't be penalized for helping build this DAO.
Yeah, I had the same thoughts, Stubbs, for sure. And like honestly, at the end of the day, I mean, it's voted on by the community anyway, right? So I mean, how much can you actually game the grant system so that you're rewarded for it and the framework of it? Um, I don't know. I feel like it's sort of like a solution in search of a problem.
But I think you could definitely gain it, especially as we start having more applicants, because like if we had 200 people apply, then you cannot expect the community to actually look through all those applications and like whittle it down to a list of even 20 or 30 that people could go through the applications. Because like especially if we leave the application a little bit more ambiguous, so that like people could say you're an artist, like you can potentially we let people apply where they kind of show their portfolio and what they're working on rather than answering 15 questions in a questionnaire. And if we leave it a little bit more open, it's time consuming to actually look at all the applications, so it's only going to happen by a few people. um, so I think that there's definitely potential for saying like you could build it in a way that really only enriches the people. Um, but and that's where we need to. I think one of the first things that we need to nail down is the execution layer. Is like really what do we have this application look like? Do we have a questionnaire that gives points? And if you get through the first round, then you get to your personalized, kind of application or how we do that. I think, I mean, we have to figure that out because that's going to determine how easy it is.
I mean, so as part of the figuring out the framework for how to onboard people into grants, through applications or otherwise, is like, how do you allow people to participate in that process but also receive grants? I mean, because of course, I mean, you guys are right? I mean, you could like say, here are 200 grants. I think 197 of them are terrible, but these 3 that I have left here are great. And oh, and by the way, they're all in the grants working group, right? So I suppose, yeah, I suppose. I mean, you could do firewalls. That might be tough. How do you guys imagine the screening process going? I mean, just when you're kind of ideating on it, what does it look like in your head? There's a lot of ways to do it, obviously.
For myself, I was thinking if it was an application I was making, I would want to show, what I would want to, like first state why I would want to join the DAO, what skills I have, and where I want to contribute in terms of either building this Web3 DAO verse that is growing, and also how those funds would help me do that. Because again, if the transition is, on a basic level, I want to leave my corporate job and go full-time DAO, then it's okay. What skills am I bringing from my life and from my work, and where do I see myself creating value, and how will the grants help me create that value and eventually do that full time outside of the context of corporate. So something like a proposal. I see that in my head. I see like a proposal being written.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and I would like a proposal as well, because so with you just talking for 2 seconds, it kind of gets back to the how are we helping people transition? So when I hear, if I were looking at applications for 100 different people, and we can fund 3 of them, if I had a proposal that said, of all the things that they wanted to, like, I'd like to start contributing in a DAO, here are the skills, here's how I'd like to contribute, I'd say, okay, come back for cohort 1 when you've started to contribute and you want to be able to do this full time rather than you want to be able to do it. So you're already starting, you are spending 5 hours a week and you want to spend 50, and if you could spend more than 20, you would be able to sustain your lifestyle and pay your rent and all of that. And that's, if I was looking at the applications, that's where I'd start to kind of differentiate who was ready and who wasn't, especially considering that we only have limited funds. 1 ETH right now, for 6 weeks, you have to start earning from the DAOs fairly quickly, or else that's not going to be enough for a lot of people. So our grant is not fully, it's not comprehensive. It's not a full ride scholarship to spending 3 months finding your place. You kind of already need to have your place in a DAO or multiple DAOs, and this makes it so that you can just go full time and get that activation energy to being sustainable. So having a proposal really, we'll all be able to understand the applicants a lot better and be able to say, hey, here's why we don't think you're ready for cohort 0, or why you're perfect for it, or why you're too far. Like, I mean, if Hero was applying and kind of saying, all the things that he's doing, I'd be like, why do you need help becoming sustainable right now? Because you're working in 5 different DAOs and 100 different working groups, and you're doing all this cool stuff. If it's not sustainable yet, how does this money actually make it sustainable, or does it just extend an unsustainable lifestyle? And so he's in my mind, with that simplified kind of example, Hero would be too far, where it's like, cool, you're past transition, you don't qualify. And a dreamer who says DAOs are really cool, I want to do all these things, I want to contribute, I'd say you're a little bit too early. If we throw you in right now, there's a much higher chance that 1 ETH in 6 weeks it just makes it so that you quit your real job and now you're in a bind. So I really like the proposal idea, and it's also why initially I was saying, hey, have the people say how much they need rather than just giving each person one ETH. Um, that didn't really work out that way, so which is why we're doing the set grants. But yeah, I think it should be proposals. I think it should be a little bit open ended so that everyone can describe their situation in a way that makes sense for them. But how exactly to do that, I'm not sure.
It raises a question I'm wondering about, like whether we're going to make people disclose financials um, to apply. Seems, I mean, pretty invasive, but maybe, right? Uh, I'm curious what you guys think about that.
Well, actually, answering your previous question about how to apply for this, I will show what I'm already doing for DAOs in this space. I'm pretty much working all day long for DAOs. I have my regular job, but it doesn't take me too much energy, so I'm spending pretty much all my days working for DAOs already. For the last 3 months, I would say 3 or 4 months. But I just I didn't get the revenue that allow me to leave my regular job. So this way, and my wallet's public, and I wouldn't be a problem me to show that I'm to show the work that I'm already doing and how much I'm being paid for this work. Because otherwise, if I was being paid well for the work that and I'm not complaining, it's the work that I love to do, but I wouldn't be applying for a grant. Mm, I'm not sure if I'm being clear with my
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Well,
but yeah. So this is yeah, and maybe it would help me a lot to have some feedback from people that are already working full-time DAO. How do they do that? Because I'm already give pretty much all my energy, all my time, and to projects that I believe, and I pretty much most of my time I spend in Bankless Brazil DAO. But just to give an example, when I work here with Hero for the Good Morning News, so 10% of my time that I dedicate to Good Morning News, I get more revenue than I get from Bankless Brazil DAO that I spend, I don't know, all the week there. So this may be more than the grant that will help me to get advice from people who are already doing this.
yeah. Well, and what you're describing is exactly, um, kind of what we would we need to tease out and potentially, you have these follow-on grants. The grant program that I had, people would come with a proposal and say, I need this much money, and then we'd kind of go through it with them and say like, hey, how does this actually get you to the next steps? Is this if you need to do X, Y, and Z, it looks like you're trying to start with Z, and then you're not going to be able to do X and Y and Z. So my initial question to you would be, if you're already spending most of your time and energy working on the DAOs, and it's not providing the financials that you need, will one ETH change that? Because it sounds like part of what you would potentially, if you said, if I got one ETH, it would allow me to say this is going to be a job. So then I would spend more time on the Good Morning News, and instead of being 10% of my time, I know that I'm going to go full time DAO. So I have to spend 50% of my time so that I can make more money, so that I can actually make up for the lost income from your job.
Uh-huh.
Because if you were to get this grant, quit your full time job, and then continue in the DAO space the way you are, a month down the road, 3 months down the road, you're going to be in trouble, because
Uh-huh.
right now, where you're spending most of your time, it's not making the money. And so it's
Yes.
like, do I need to charge differently? Do I need to, raise the price of my mints? Do I need to like, maybe having the grant would give you the time to go through the financials and really, um, figure that out. But I would want to see that as part of the proposal and knowing that, hey, I know that what I'm doing right now is not sustainable, but that's because it's my, stress relief. It's my hobby. It's how I, have fun outside of work.
Hmm.
But if I had a 1 ETH grant, I would change my mindset because I'm going to quit my job and now I'm going to focus on the money making side of things. So I
Hmm.
want to make sure that that thought process was being gone through so that you could be successful rather than like when you hear about lottery winners where they win $1 million and then a year later they're broke and you're like, how's that possible? They were living on $30,000 a year and then they just got $1 million. How could they go broke?
Yeah.
um so
And And even more important for me that I saw here in the document from the grants proposal, I mean, of course, the money is really important, but the support of the community to kind of teaching, okay, I'm already doing this, but I'm doing something wrong. If I want to go full down, so it will not become just a hobby and the place to spend time with people, with really interesting people, will be work. So I will have to get money from that, and I will want to learn. Okay, how did you guys do it? Because and you know what I mean. Okay, 1 eat is really important, but if I spend 1 eat in 3 months, okay, I'm not gonna have this anymore, and so I have to learn in this time. How did you guys do it, and how could I do it? And for me, this is the most important part of the problem.
yeah,
I,
no, absolutely, and that's I 100% agree. And if eh, we're probably not going to have that formal mentorship, and now it'll be more of that, you know, relying on the rest of the DAO. And yeah, I mean, if some people don't like from what you're saying, you recognize it and you want to help, you want to learn. Um, you know, that's the most important step, honestly. A lot of people are like, well, I just need to be able to spend more time on what I'm doing exactly now.
Hmm.
And if that were the
And
thought process, it'd be scary. The fact that
uh,
you're like, yeah, I just need some more time to learn and to be able to dedicate myself, then maybe it is exactly what you need. So having a more open application allows you to explain that just like you've just done, where I'm like, it sounds like it makes sense.
yeah,
Uh,
and just to be clear, and it's a suggestion. Sometimes, okay, you have 3 eat to distribute to people, but sometimes it will be nice to have more people on board, even if they don't get the money, but to get the feedback. Just like me, I'm already here, so I wouldn't leave this space if I don't get the grant. But I would be glad to have this community support, you know, because just like I said, some people can arrive here from the corporate world, believing that if they spend more time, they will do it, but it's not mathematical. It's not. You can be sure that it will gonna happen. It doesn't represent that more time spent here, you're gonna get a bigger revenue. It's just not like that, and people have to be aware of that as well.
yeah, and we did talk about doing an informal, exactly what you're describing, where it's like, hey, I may not need ETH, I just need support, resources, kind of a framework to kind of follow, where it's like, hey, maybe I should be looking at, using Opolis or whatever for some insurance, and maybe I should be looking at this and like having that framework. I think down the road, once we've had some successful cohorts where we see the growing pains that people go through, we'll be able to support that a lot better. And I hope we do formally create something like that. Um, but yeah, for the first couple cohorts, it's like, okay, let's do that with the in the community chats, and kind of, I bet you you'd get more advice and thoughts and anything that you could imagine if you threw out even into like the general chat, like, hey guys, here's where I'm at, here's what I want to do you have advice? I think you'd have 15 different really successful people reach out with good stuff.
Yeah, I
Even if
really
you don't do
like
it
that.
initially.
I really like the idea about each grantee having their own dedicated channel on the Discord server. I thought that was totally brilliant because it's like, in a way, I mean, what this is like a scholarship to a charter school slash real life mentorship in the real world of this work. And this paradigm of work is so new that there's no school that exists to train. So we just have to kind of immerse people in the experience firsthand. And I think that's the best kind of school you could have. And like, I think it's great to have the ideal of the grantee using the grant directly to immediately fully transition to DAO work. But I also wouldn't consider it a failure if like they spend 6 weeks or 3 months or however long they can live off of the grant, they spend that time studying DAO and crypto full time and putting work into things. And then at the end of that term, if they still have to get a part-time job again, that's still a great success because that's going to enrich their life and all of the projects they contributed to. And that's going to move them further on their journey into DAO work. So like that's kind of how like I see it, is not necessarily black and white, because like I think DAOs are going to become a lot less of a hard line, and the culture of decentralized organizations will permeate into all kinds of things. So even if somebody has to go get a part-time job at a coffee shop, well, like their education in the DAO space that they got because of the grant is going to influence how they show up to that job. And that maybe they become a management position there, and then they end up like 10 years later actually turning that coffee shop into a decentralized organization because they had this training like 10 years ago. They understand how to do that. So like, I don't necessarily think the metric for success should definitely be whether you totally give up all your other work and make money only from DAOs. But like that's obviously a great goal. But I wouldn't hold it super hard. And then the other thought was that like people all over the world will decide for themselves like how much one ETH can do for them. And I wouldn't like be closed to the idea that one ETH could really get somebody through a big transition. And in a way, like we don't necessarily need to just cater to nations where one ETH like doesn't even get you a month's like living needs. Like in a lot of places, like for me living in Mexico right now, like one ETH can get me by for like many months. So like that's kind of my idea. If I were to apply for the grant and I were to get it, like I'd have funding to study Solidity and smart contracts really, really hard, and put in like several months of full-time studying on that. So, in a way, like having the grant amount low at the beginning kind of optimizes for people in parts of the world who need it the most. And then people who like can't survive off of one ETH for a month, like maybe they're not even going to apply, and that'll kind of create like a natural filter that might be good for us. But
Yeah, this is a great point because depending on where we are in the world, one need represents way more money, and yeah, it will be easier to live with one ETH more time in some place.
So
Yeah.
this is exactly why every time I've talked about it, I've said what is sustainable and what does it mean to DAO for each different person. Because you're like, I agree. If you're working in a DAO it shouldn't preclude you from doing things in the real world. If what your ideal life is to work at a coffee shop part-time and work in DAOs part-time, and that pays your bills, DAOs are supposed to create that freedom. So, with it just needs to be sustainable. We don't want people to get a grant, quit a job that they need to have, and try to continue in the same lifestyle that they can't sustain. So, somewhere where 1 ETH it goes a lot further, and you could, you want to be doing Solidity, you're, setting up programs and everything, but you want to be able to do it better, like your OBS stuff where you're like, well, I figured out how to do it, but I want to, be able to run a whole server and be able to do a mint with a 10K PFP project and not have, somebody attack the project and DDoS it and all of that. I want to know the details so that I can help people do that. And so I need to be able to study full time for the 4 months while I do the stuff. Like that makes sense. You've got to plan towards sustainability, and that's what matters. So, somebody who's spending 50 ETH a month and, because they make a ton in the traditional world, for them to get 1 ETH is not sustainable, even if, it's just not. So they wouldn't make sense for the project, whereas somebody else, it may. So I totally agree. It cannot, that's why we need people to tell their stories, because if it's sustainable for you or not. No one else can decide that.
Hey guys, just excuse me, and it's great to talk to you, but I have to go.
Hey, well, thanks for joining in.
Much love, Diego.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Diego, if possible, could we talk regarding what you're talking about, the education part, and speaking with other
Sure.
people working in DAOs about how they've been able to grow in that? Maybe we could discuss that and see if there's something to come up with.
Okay, great. That will be nice. Just shoot me, send me a message, and we can talk.
Do. Thanks.
Great.
Take care, man.
Thanks, guys. You too. Have a great day.
Much
and night.
love.
Bye-bye. See you.
Ciao.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to run as well, but I think that we need to and the most important thing next, in my opinion, is getting started on what that application looks like, and how do we think that people can communicate why this grant makes sense and why it leads to sustainable, lifestyle moving forward. Because I totally agree, Maiko. This is not, it shouldn't be optimized for people who are spending 10 ETH per month and want to do basically TradFi in DeFi and these things that sometimes we start optimizing towards. I don't want it to be where it's like, oh, you have to be from a certain part of the world in order for this to make sense. I just want to make sure that anyone who wants to transition, who has a plan, who this will be able to help them, they're able to take advantage of it. And having kind of an ambiguous open application process where you can tell your story, I think is kind of necessary in order to cater to so many different potential applicants. But at the same time, we do have to have some sort of framework so that people can say, hey, what do I need to do to apply? And we can point them towards something, even if it's just 10 different examples where, one example is of somebody who needs 1 ETH per month. One example is somebody who, still needs a couple ETH per month, but they just need the time to get the activation energy. And, maybe it's just providing examples of what potential grant applications could look like. But, I know a lot of people won't apply if they can't follow some sort of framework, because they'll just be like, oh, I must not make sense.
Totally. Oh, one quick idea before you head out is mostly just the way of thinking about the situation, which is kind of like cohort 0 is a sort of a beta program in a way, you know, for us to learn from what's a successful way of doing things and what's not, and how to change things. I think we're already approaching it that way. I don't know if anybody's like actually called it a beta run or not, but in a way that's what it feels like. And it'd be kind of cool to at least kind of just call it that and then recognize that it might be kind of internal. Like we might want internal like participants in DAOpunks to apply for the grant specifically because it's the beta program, so that we can kind of go through the problems and successes together instead of like bringing in a bunch of new people from the outside into some situation that we haven't totally cleaned up all the way. Recognizing it as a beta program kind of in a way justifies also accepting like internal applications. But that was just something that came to mind earlier in the discussion.
Yeah, I 100%. Yeah, in my mind, it is definitely a beta, and I think it'll kind of continue being a beta. It needs to be, because the space changes so rapidly that you're like, if we try to ossify at any point in the near future, then we're gonna fail. But yeah, I think that we want people within the community partly because of the whole making sure there's enough involvement that they can help us learn from what's working and what's not. But it's like, who is the internal community? I mean, Joey, I don't think has a DAOpunk. Is that true? But like,
Hey, no, I got one. I got one
oh, you
yesterday.
did. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, you've been contributing and being part of the community for a while now. So it's like that's the community. Um, and right now, I think it should be the community, just because we only have 3 grants that we're giving out. We still have a lot to learn, and so I don't know if we have the bandwidth to try and bring a bunch of other people in yet. Even even if we had the bandwidth, I don't know if it makes sense yet. But yeah, it'll be. I think the big thing is communicating that, like, you might be the right person. Tell us why you're the right person, rather than us telling you if you are or not.
So, my 2 cents, just while we were on the call, I was doing a search to see what guides are there in terms of like either how to DAO or how to work in the DAO and so on. I know there have been like a few Twitter threads I came across, but most of the information, at least I've seen online, and I've not done a comprehensive search, is mostly about DAOs, about what they are, and about governance, and about tokens, and so on. So I think in line with the grant program, and for the 6 weeks period to sort of have some sort of roadmap, or also to cater to those who are involved in the community in the DAO, or if we are still considering, trying to invite an audience of those who are not familiar with DAOs or cryptos or working online, having some sort of rubric of guides or education, here what you mentioned, I don't know if it's in the same vein, but some sort of framework of, okay, based on our ethos, this is what a DAO is. This is how you can get involved in a DAO. These are ways you can start contributing value in a DAO. These are ways you can secure the volatility of a token you have, so that you can have either recurring revenue and so on. Like, these are just ideas, but I think trying to create that framework to educate about what a DAO is may also feed into your idea. I think Stubbs or Michael, you were mentioning about maybe looking at the grant not as an expectation to go full time, but more as an avenue to experience what a DAO is. And maybe that person, based on their personal, where they're based, where they're living, or what work they do, and their own own feeling of what it is being in a DAO may make the leap themselves. So I'm now kind of like tuning myself towards what educational material we could create for the space.
So as our grant program grows and everything, I 100% want to have that. I think the reason why we've specified kind of like people who already know what DAOs are and everything is, um, working in a DAO is a lot like working, like working for yourself in startups, small business, all that, um, where you almost need someone to jump in a little bit and get their toes wet because it takes a certain personality. Like a lot of people don't want the ambiguity that exists in DAOs, and having the educational material to help people understand what they are and everything is really important. But like, like you don't know if you can be successful and if you actually like the work until you start contributing. And that's why we're like, hey, we want you to know what a DAO is and already be contributing at some level, even if it's just an hour a week, or even if it's just sitting there on the discords and asking some questions once in a while, and where you're like, I don't have the time to contribute or whatever, but I understand kind of the process and how it works. Because if we start giving out the grants for kind of that, what I would say is like the pre-DAO worker person, I mean, the education is important. It has to be developed for this space to grow. But I don't think that our program, at least, is going to do that, at least as step one. I think we're going to focus on people who are already knowing how they can contribute and just want to be able to expand that contribution, rather than educating the people who are thinking they might want to join the DAO and wondering what that looks like.
Just a real brief +1 stubs. Agreed completely.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna get out of here, but for the next week or so, I think my focus for this is going to be distilling kind of my thoughts on how to communicate, if you're the right person for the grants and stuff like that, like distilling how to communicate what an application looks like while still allowing it to be ambiguous. I think that that's where a lot of the focus should be. That's where I'm going to focus for the next week. But we've got about 50 things we need to do before we can actually execute on this grants program. So, throw it in the chat. Let me know what you guys are thinking, what you guys want to work on. But I think that's kind of step one in my book.
Nice.
Sounds good, Stubbs. Thank you. And then, what do you guys want to do for timing? Do you want to keep this time going forward? Should we let us? Do we want to do regular meetings weekly going forward? Is that the thought process?
I think that we should have weekly meetings. I think probably do a later one. Western Hemisphere, America time frame next week. Try an early one again. See if people join in. But obviously today, doing really early morning didn't bring in the people that we thought it would.
No, and they all RSVP too, So, this is kind of like the herding cast of screwdrivers problem of DAO sometimes, right? Is you send out reminders to people, and say like, hey, reminder, we have a meeting tomorrow, which, I'd like to avoid, right? But maybe it's necessary. Okay, so do we want to let us meet for next week, or should we just pick a time?
I'd say, well, let's do let us meet. Well, the time what was it, like 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock Pacific last week? That worked really well for me. I'd be happy to do that again, but we can throw up a let us meet.
Sometimes I think that let us meets are probably just like not as useful as I want them to be. So maybe we just say 3 o'clock. Maybe alternate between 3 p.m. and 3 a.m. Just semi-monthly, and go that way.
Yeah, I agree. Let's try the 3 a.m., 3 p.m. A couple times and see if it catches on. If not, we can just do 3 p.m.s or whatever.
Okay, I will.
Fine by me.
I will put that calendar up right now. I'll throw a blast in grants, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, guys.
Nice. Yeah, share that doc stubs for the application when you get it started, and I'll dig in a little bit too.
Cool.
Thank you.
Cheers, friends. Bye bye.
All right. Ciao.